on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:36 here on O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in at 8:05. Matt Bonesteel, the Washington Post sports department, to talk about the beginning of the Olympics tonight. And then at 8:35, Brett Baer, Fox News Channel. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Patrice Onwuka. Good morning, Patrice.
Good morning. Happy Friday, everybody.
That was the sound. That was the sound Wednesday night in front of Union Station as pro-Hamas anti-Semitic protesters dragged a Park Service police officer across the pavement. Arrests were made, but just yesterday we learned that those arrested specifically for assaulting a police officer were released and charges were dropped. Joining us now is Greggory Pemberton. He's the chairman of the D.C. Police Union, and although that wasn't your department assaulted Wednesday night, it was your brother in uniform, your brother or sister in blue. Thanks for joining us.
Larry, Patrice, thanks so much for having me.
This is kind of indicative of what's going on in Washington, D.C., no matter which of the many law enforcement agencies that are here. We get a lot of lip service about how, oh, my gosh, we want to protect our cops, we need to protect our cops. But when push comes to shove, it all depends on the political ideology, it appears, of those who are harming police officers.
Well, that's right. That's, I think the first issue here is, as you mentioned in the opening, is that all of these agencies are completely understaffed. We saw an incredibly violent week just in the past 48 hours. It was 12 shot, 2 killed, 2 triple shootings, 1 double shooting, and then on top of that, all of the civil disturbance that you see. And we just do not have the personnel, whether that's, MPD or the Park Police or even the Capitol Police. You may have seen online they even asked like 200 NYPD officers to come down and help, and that's still not enough because we're just not doing enough to make sure the staffing is correct. But you're absolutely right. In my almost 20 years of experience, what I can tell you is that, and first let me just say that anybody who comes to the city in a group and decides to destroy property and harm people and hurt cops and threaten others, you need to be arrested and charged to the full extent of the law. That's not protesting.
A quaint that's an old-fashioned notion.
It is, right? But I think, unfortunately, as you pointed out, when we do arrest those people who come in the city and cause that kind of damage or hurt people, there's some sort of rubric that goes on about what their ideology is to determine whether or not we charge them. And that's a really sad commentary on what's happening is, well, why were they doing it? And if it falls in line with certain ideologies, then they're let out without charges. If it's not in line with those ideologies, then we throw them underneath the jail, and it's a really sort of frustrating place to be.
Well, it's absolutely frustrating as citizens and people visiting the city or people who just want to see their capital protected at all times. I'm wondering how can we address the shortage of officers, whether it's DC Police, the National Park Police. I mean, can technology be an assistant in this case? I'm just trying to figure out from a solution standpoint what can be done, because obviously the challenges of recruitment, are longstanding and continue to get worse. But is there a way to get around some of those recruitment challenges?
I mean, sure. There's ways that we can do things to get around the recruitment challenges, but they're not going to solve problem, right? These are eyedropper levels worth of fixes when we need a fire hose. We have to take these recruiting issues on head on and these retention issues. We're actually having more officers resign from the department than retire. And the retirements are up considerably more than they were just say 3 or 4 years ago. So until we start correcting what's going on within the working conditions and within the environment of policing in these individual agencies, I don't think there's any type of technology or tool that's going to, allow us to handle these things. Because what you need over the past few days, like you've seen, is just a significant number of police officers to respond and keep the peace and address these crimes that are going on in the neighborhoods. So we really have to deal with the recruiting issue first.
Let's get right to it, because most of these law enforcement agencies, if not all of them, get much of their funding from the federal government. That includes D.C. Metro. A big part of the way the District of Columbia operates is that they get money from the federal government because it's the federal capital city. So, in your estimation, we heard that this protest got out of control and it ended up being mob-like behavior with vandalism, destruction, theft, violence. It happened because the police were not adequately staffed to handle this. Do you believe that what we're seeing now is a direct result from the defund the police movement from 4 years ago?
Without question, absolutely without question, that's what it was. So if you rewind the clock back to 2020, every politician in the country, even on some of the right side of the aisle, were suggesting that we needed to do something to tamp down on law enforcement, and this idea that police brutality is rampant everywhere and we shouldn't have police doing these type of enforcement strategies. And the remnants of all of the legislation that went through, particularly on the local levels throughout the country, still exists. And that's what's prohibiting the agencies from being fully staffed and from officers being able to go out and get out of their car and do their job properly. So until we start to go back and look at what was done in that 2020, 2022 era with all of the legislation that was passed, particularly locally, and if you talk here in D.C., the Policing and Criminal Justice Reform Act is a nightmare, and it still exists in its entirety. It has not been amended at all. And it is the number one reason why we cannot hire people and why so many officers leave this agency before their time. And so until politicians go back and look at these things, I don't think things are going to change much.
I'm no expert, but just by looking at sort of how Western civilization has figured out law enforcement over the many centuries, you have enough law enforcement officers to be able to keep the peace. If someone does break the law, you arrest them, and you then try them and prosecute them. It's that simple. And none of those things are happening right now in D.C. Maybe some arrests are made if a cop is able to arrest somebody, considering how short-staffed, but everything else has fallen apart. Maybe we'll be able to reinvent the wheel soon here, Greg Pemberton. Thanks for joining us as always.
Larry, Patrice, thank you so much. Have a good day.
It's 7:43.